for achieving international reputations, educational excellence, and conservation insight.
Perubahan menjadi PTNBH membuat Universitas Negeri Semarang lebih fleksibel dalam memanfaatkan sumber daya yang ada, sehingga kita bisa berkontribusi optimal untuk bangsa dan negara tercinta.
9 faculties and 1 postgraduate school are bridges for young Indonesians to realize their dreams. Faculty of Education and Psychology, Faculty of Languages and Arts, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Faculty of Mathematics and Natural Sciences, Faculty of Engineering, Faculty of Sports Science, Faculty of Economics and Business, Faculty of Law, and the youngest, Faculty of Medicine. The accelerated development of facilities and infrastructure are signs of our passion to serve others. Healthy governance is a proof of sincere dedication from our heart. This is Universitas Negeri Semarang, home to young Indonesian talents who are ready to grow and contribute to the wider society.
Di UNES, kami bukan hanya mempelajari ilmu pengetahuan, kami juga belajar tentang pengabdian, agar di kemudian hari kami bisa berkontribusi optimal untuk kemajuan Indonesia.
The network of cooperation on 5 continents has strengthened its work to become the pride of Indonesia's educational institutions. Creativity, values, and intention are reflected into the work. Knowledge and innovation are the foundation of its dedication. Universitas Negeri Semarang continues to transform. We welcome a new and brighter day of future. For the nation, for Indonesia, for human civilization.
Conservation is preservation of life on Earth, and that, above all else, is worth fighting for. Right here, in the middle of the northern coast of Java, Universitas Negeri Semarang had taken this fight seriously, working on to preserve our nature, our culture, and our very own humanity. Against the challenges of time, building up the younger generations, molding them to the brilliant future. Through education, we grow awareness and concern, preparing them for the sake of the stability of our hereafter on this blue planet we call home. Sir David Attenborough once in his broadcast said that the final chapter is ours to write. We already know what we need to do, therefore, what happens next remains up to us. With the vision of being an international reputed law faculty and gilded with conservation's values on our attributes, the Faculty of Law Universitas Negeri Semarang had continuously provided its pupils with the best amenity and environment for them to thrive and study. The determinations of service are among the faculty goals in nurturing the future of our nation with our commitment to prepare future legal experts qualified with broad insight, intelligent minds, resilient and reliable, as well as fair and prevailing character. With ceaseless advancements to offer, the Faculty of Law endeavor to provide the students on their needs for the progress and development of their studies. Students at the Faculty of Law also encouraged to broaden their insight by using technologies such as e-learnings, as well as using informations to update their awareness on global conditions and ignite their critical way of thinking. With a proficient experience in this field of legal research and education for 15 years, the Faculty of Law remained consistent to form the students' character development within the frame of Pancasila and Undang-Undang Dasar 1945. The Faculty of Law also created a balanced hub for students to fulfill their needs of physical and spiritual growth, habituating piety as the foundations of their daily life. Furthermore, cultivating tolerance to the diverse members within our academic community in line with the ideal value of integrations comprised by Pancasila and the Undang-Undang Dasar. The development of research and interpretations on legal studies are our main approach to enrich the students' knowledge. The students gain plethora of insights from the lectures and discussion sessions with our lecturers. With about 3,480 active undergraduate students, 320 active postgraduate students, and our recently opened doctorate program, the Faculty of Law offers an interactive space for the students to interchange and enhance their knowledge. Here, at the Faculty of Law, not only we develop soft skills of our students with theories and lectures, but we also provide them the skill and experience to act as legal practitioners, training them to be the best professionals in the coming of times. In the late 5 years, the Faculty of Law had witnesses an increase in the numbers of applicants. The Faculty of Law provides a testable and qualified educational standard accredited nationally by BAN-PT and internationally by AQAS. Also, the Faculty of Law is home to 2022 students' activity groups and organizations. Therein, the students gain a lot of experience of advocational skills, of diplomatic skills, leadership skills, and those and others to refine their quality in the future social life. From spiritual to sporting, there is an endless room for our students to develop their interests. And from these extracurriculars and organizational activities, the students also gain achievements that brings them the prestige and competence to be proud of. Hence, we are confident that the students in the Faculty of Law are more than just qualified, but also ready to participate in the continuity of our struggle, to uphold the justice in the name of humanity with all of the challenges thereof. The Faculty of Law also devoted to uphold the values of the Tridharma Perguruan Tinggi with the aforementioned responsibility of education. The Faculty of Law also carry out the duty of research through our 21 journals, of which some are accredited nationally and internationally. On our responsibility of dedications to the society, Faculty of Law also participate in the community service, which is one of the Merdeka Belajar Kampus Merdeka program that Universitas Negeri Semarang implemented, such as student exchange, field practice, humanitarian projects, entrepreneurship, and etc. To further cultivate these values, the Faculty of Law also provide 10 research and study centers, of which the students are able to elaborate their critical thinking about the law as it is and the multidimensional implications of it, and also to compare it to real-life conditions. Therewithal, we also accommodate 8 legal clinics, of which the students can accentuate their practical and professional abilities, whilst also performing communal service in the form of legal advocacy and advisory. In acquiring the visions to obtain international reputations, Faculty of Law Universitas Negeri Semarang had built collaborations and partnership with numerous law schools and universities around the world. Alongside to that, over various government and private institutes all over Indonesia. These collaborations not only add the connections of the faculty, but it also brings opportunities for the students to apply for exchange, internships, work practices, and resources for their future research. The Faculty of Law, Universitas Negeri Semarang, has committed to provide the best service when it came to terms of the progress and growth of academic developments of the students. The Board of Lecturers, administrative staffs, and the entire faculty officers are prepared to perform their best ministrations and assistance for the successions and continuance of their educations within our faculty. Sitting back to the quoted saying of Sir David Attenborough, that final chapter of whom we are the author refers to how do we take our actions on that what we need to do in terms of preserving the future of our humanity. Here, from the hilly region of Sekaran, we are confident in our preparations to hail the future laying ahead, united in our service to provide justice to mankind. The Faculty of Law, Universitas Negeri Semarang. Viva Justitia!
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Saya Ali Masyar Mursyid, Dekan Fakultas Hukum Universitas Negeri Semarang. Fakultas Hukum adalah fakultas yang masih muda. Namun demikian, prestasi-prestasi Fakultas Hukum tidak kalah dibanding dengan fakultas-fakultas hukum yang lain. Kita berakselerasi untuk menjadi fakultas yang bersanding dan bersaing dengan fakultas-fakultas hukum yang lain. Fakultas Hukum di bawah visi menjadi fakultas hukum bereputasi dunia, pelopor kecemerlangan pendidikan yang berwawasan konservasi. Memiliki 61 dosen, 19 doktor, 3 profesor, dan selebihnya adalah magister. Fakultas Hukum yang lahir tahun 2007, kita memiliki 3 prodi. Yang pertama adalah prodi S1 Ilmu Hukum, prodi S2 Magister Ilmu Hukum, dan lahir tahun 2023 ini yaitu program Doktor Ilmu Hukum. Dan di bawah S1 kita memiliki 3 konsentrasi, yaitu bagian pidana, bagian perdata dagang, dan bagian HTN-HAN. Fakultas Hukum yang masih muda juga memiliki berbagai macam keunggulan dan prestasi. Di antaranya adalah kita telah memiliki 21 jurnal. 2 jurnal di antaranya telah terindeks Scopus. Selain itu, dosen-dosen kita juga berprestasi di berbagai bidang, terserap dan bereputasi di tingkat nasional hingga mencapai internasional. Kita juga memiliki program PKPA yang juga telah diakui dan dengan fakultas hukum yang lain. Di bawah dekan, kita memiliki 3 wakil dekan, yaitu wakil dekan 1 bidang akademik dan kemahasiswaan, wakil bidang 2 bidang perencanaan dan sumber daya, dan bidang 3 adalah riset, bisnis, dan kerjasama.
And also Mr. Suhadi as our speakers today. So, ladies and gentlemen, more respected guests and all participants in Zoom meeting today, the event of Global Classroom between Faculty of Law Negeri Semarang and Faculty of Law Tilburg University will begin soon. So, the leaders and invited guests as well as the participants are expected to follow the activity carefully, and online participants are expected to turn on the camera and turn off the audio during the event.
24 minutes.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Perus Rahmita Lamsyah. It's a precious chance for me to be the master of ceremony on this very special occasion. Global Classroom between Faculty of Law Universitas Negeri Semarang and Faculty of Law Tilburg University with the theme Environmental Law and Sustainability in International and Indonesia Perspective. First of all, let's say thanks to God who given us guidance, happiness, health, and mercy so we can attend and participate in this special event without any obstacle. So I would like to welcome the Honorable Dean of Faculty of Law Universitas Negeri Semarang, Mr. Dr. Aldi Masyar SHMH, the Honorable Olaf Vice Dean Faculty of Law, the Honorable Olaf Head Division in Faculty of Law, and also the Honorable Academic and Administration Staff. And also I would like to welcome Dr. Sanita Van Wyk, LLM, as our speaker today from Tilburg University, and Mr. Suhadi SHMSE from Universitas Negeri Semarang, and all of the audience from Faculty of Law Universitas Negeri Semarang and Tilburg University. So, on this special event, we have several agendas. The first agenda opening by Master of Ceremony, the second agenda singing the National Anthem of Indonesia and Mars Faculty of Law Universitas Negeri Semarang. The third agenda welcoming and opening speech by the Dean of Faculty of Law Universitas Negeri Semarang. And the next agenda main section of this event, and the last agenda closing by Master of Ceremony. So, well, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin to the first section by singing the National Anthem of Indonesia, Indonesia Raya, and Mars Faculty of Law Universitas Negeri Semarang. All the guests and audiences, please be rise.
sarjana hukum bermutu, takwa padanya berjiwa Pancasila. Dengan berdasar pada Pancasila dan Undang-Undang Dasar 45 serta Tridharma perguruan tinggi sebagai dasar pengabdiannya, majulah fakultas kita, jayalah selamanya, memelihara dan mengembangkan ilmu hukum yang berkeadaban. Fakultas Hukum UNER Semarang siap sedia sosok kemajuan zaman.
Thank you. Move to the next agenda, welcoming speech and open the global classroom officially by the Dean of Faculty of Law, Universitas Negeri Semarang. The speech will be delivered by Mr. Dr. Ali Masyar, SHMH. For Mr. Ali, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Feroz. The Honorable invited speakers, Dr. Sanita Van Wyk. Good morning, Dr. Sanita.
Good morning.
Okay. The Honorable Dr. Andes Swadi, SMSI. Selamat siang, Pak Swadi.
Selamat siang, Pak Dikan.
Okay. The Honorable to all of Vice Deans Faculty of Law Universitas Negeri Semarang, Bu Indah, Bu Aprila Nirafita, Pak Azil Maskur. Okay. The Honorable all participants of the third Global Classroom 2023. The lecturers and students of Faculty of Law Universitas Negeri Semarang. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Warm greeting to all of you. It is an honor for me to be given this opportunity to deliver this opening speech. Please allow me to express our appreciation for your availability to attend and to join this academic event. I, on behalf of our faculty, welcome you all to the Global Classroom in collaboration with Dr. Sanita Van Wyk, International Business Law, Tilburg University, Netherlands. Global Classroom is an academic event to support the University K performance and Indonesian perspective. Hopefully, this event will bring benefit not only for us, but also for legal developments. Thank you for your attention, and without any further ado, let us officially begin this event. Good morning.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Arlie, for the welcoming speech and open the global classroom officially. So for the next session is photo session. Please, all the audience, turn on the camera because the committee will take a screenshot for a photo group session. Yeah, maybe I will guide in 3, 2, 1. Once again, 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you so much. So well, ladies and gentlemen, finally, we come to the main event of Global Classroom between Faculty of Law Universitas Negeri Semarang and Faculty of Law Tilburg University with the theme Environmental Law and Sustainability in International and Indonesia Perspective, which will be guided by our moderator. She is Mrs. Dina Sylvia Putri, LLM. So before, I would like to tell us the curriculum vitae of Mrs. Dina. Mrs. Dina Sylvia Putri LLM started her teaching career at Universitas Negeri Semarang in 2023 at Civil Trade Division, Faculty of Law, and she took her undergraduate degree and her Master of Notary at Faculty of Law, Universitas Erlangga, Surabaya, and then she completed her master degree in law at Tilburg University, the Netherlands. So without any further ado, Mrs. Dina, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, MC. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, Sanita. So thank you to the MC to introduce me. I would like to welcome all of the participants here. It is such an honor for me to meet all of you from all around the world, great people in this event. So greetings, everyone. My name is Dina, and I will be the moderator for the third Global Classroom 2023, Environmental Law and Sustainability in International and Indonesia Perspective, held by Faculty of Law Universitas Negeri Semarang in collaboration with International Business Law Tilburg University, with the speaker Dr. Sanita van Wyk, LLM, from International Business Law Tilburg University, the Netherlands, and Dr. Anda Suhadi, SHMSI, from Faculty of Law Universitas Negeri Semarang. Before we start the session, I would like to read the code of conduct of today's event. So first, please turn on your camera and use the virtual background, and make sure to turn on your turn your mic off except when it is your time to speak. Second, the speaker will deliver the session first, and the question and answer will be after the two speaker session. Third, everyone who would like to ask questions, please write your question and for which speaker on the chat room, or raise your hand on the question and answer session, and I will pick the question. So I would like to read the CV of our first speaker. I will share the screen first. Okay, so Dr. Vanita van Wyk, LLM. She is the lecturer at Master International Business Law, Tilburg University, with her latest degree is LLD in Public International Law and International Environmental Law at Stellenbosch University, South Africa, and 2 years at Free University, Berlin, Germany. Currently, she is the lecturer in Master International Business Law, Tilburg University, and previously she is also an attorney of the High Court of South Africa. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome Sanita to deliver her session. Sanita, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, everyone, for an extremely warm welcome. For me, it is early in the morning in the Netherlands, and it was so wonderful to wake up with the beautiful music and your national anthem. So it's indeed a wonderful event, and I'm really honored to be a part of it. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Let me just get... Right, Dina, can you please let me know, do you only see one slide?
Yeah, I currently see one slide, but I can see like the slide in the left side. I mean like your... Okay, now I can see one slide. Cool.
Yeah, perfect. If there's any problem at any point, please don't hesitate just to let me know by switching on your microphones. I can't see the chat or any hands at the moment. Okay, so I was asked to speak a little bit about something that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is international environmental law. And I was also given the freedom to speak about something that I truly enjoy, and that is the international legal climate change regime. So I will do my best to lay out to the students today some of the foundational elements that I think are important to facilitate a discussion in this context. So like mentioned, I am Sanita van Wyk. I'm currently a lecturer at Tilburg University in the Netherlands. So what we'll speak about in the next 30 to 45 minutes is the international legal climate change regime. But specifically, we will focus on the development of this regime. And also at the end of this time that we have together, hopefully you will have a really good understanding of what exactly the framework entails of this international regime. And if there's time, we'll also speak about the Sustainable Development Goals. But first, I would like to introduce myself a bit better to you. I am living in the Netherlands now, but actually I am from South Africa and I am South African by nationality. And the pictures you see on the screen is actually where I grew up. So I grew up in the Kalahari Desert in the north of South Africa, really close to Namibia and Botswana. And this was sort of what I saw on a daily basis as a young child. And I think if I can just share a very interesting story with you, because it is so deeply connected, I think, to what we will discuss today. When I was a really young child, there was a river that flowed through the town in which we lived. And this river was called the Gamagara River. But when I went to university, the river stopped flowing. There was no more water, and an environmental study was conducted, which showed that the mining activity in the region has caused the groundwater to dry up. And there's a massive mine in this area. It's an iron ore mine. It was at one point the second biggest or the biggest iron ore mine in the whole world. And the study showed that in order for this river to ever flow again, the mining activity would have to be stopped for at least 100 years if this area was to be rehabilitated to the point that we would again see this Gamagara River flowing. And I think this is really what influenced me to conduct my doctoral studies in law, this massively complex relationship that we as humans have to the earth and the natural environment. And I think it's beautifully, the story beautifully illustrates the importance of something like the international legal climate change regime. So let's get started. Because I am, of course, a lawyer, I always like to start with a definition for climate change by a lawyer, Peggy Skuman. And she defines climate change as changes in our weather patterns due to an increase in the average global temperature. And this increase has been largely caused by heightened greenhouse gas emissions from human activities following the Industrial Revolution in the mid-19th century. So, of course, when we speak about climate change and we want to speak about this whole international regime that governs climate change, we cannot leave out the role of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So this panel is the United Nations body that assesses the science that is related to climate change. And their work is very important to inform our policy and our laws. And if you're at all interested in this topic, they have fantastic reports about the science behind climate change and how we need to adapt and how we need to respond to climate change. So when we speak about this international climate change regime, this really long term that I mentioned the whole time, let's try to formulate some kind of definition for what exactly this is. So we can say that the international legal climate change regime is a global legal framework that aims at regulating the interaction of human activity with the global climate system to mitigate global climate change and adapt to it. So you can see that this regime consists out of two really important focus areas. First, the mitigation of climate change, and secondly, the adaptation to climate change. So when we speak about mitigation, of course, we speak about how can we reduce global greenhouse gas emissions. And when we speak about adaptation, we speak about how can we respond to climate change and how can we adapt to climate change. So in understanding really the basics of the international climate change regime, there are two time periods that are quite significant. First of all, we have the time period before the Paris Agreement. And then secondly, we have the time period after the Paris Agreement. So we'll start sort of at the beginning, before we had the Paris Agreement, and this was about 1992, 1994, to give you an idea. And the cornerstone of the regime, if you want to call it that, is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Now, there is a lot to say about this very important international convention, but for our purposes today and in the time that we had, I decided to highlight two components. And they're kind of highlighted on the screen as well. The first component that I highlighted is the Montreal Protocol. And the second aspect in this convention that is important is this continuing reference to common but differentiated responsibility, or this idea that developed countries have to take the lead in combating climate change and our response to climate change. So firstly, you might ask yourself, why do we see this reference to the Montreal Protocol in this convention? And I think the reason for it is quite interesting. So at the time when the UNFCCC, this convention, was really coming into life, there already existed a key innovation, which was the Montreal Protocol. And the Montreal Protocol was the most important protocol that was regulating this international regime regarding the ozone. That was about in the mid-1980s that there were some ozone issues, and they had a series of protocols, the Montreal Protocol being the most important one to regulate these affairs. And then, so when it came time to address climate change, the only model that people had seen was this model that dealt with the ozone, and the Montreal Protocol did so quite successfully. So when, again, we had to deal with something that was happening up there in the sky because of what we are doing down here on Earth, people thought, why not choose this Montreal Protocol as a kind of a framework to also deal with climate change? And that's why we see in the UNFCCC this reference to Montreal Protocol. Then the second reference we see is a continued referral to common but differentiated responsibilities between parties, between different states. So between the developed states and the developing states. And I'll say a bit more about this in my next slide when I discuss now the Kyoto Protocol. So in 1995, it was decided that we really needed a protocol to the UNFCCC. So at the Conference of the Parties in 1995, the Kyoto Protocol was really born. And in 1997, the Kyoto Protocol came into existence. So what was the intention then of this protocol? Well, practically it had to give effect to the UNFCCC, but the intention was always for the protocol to be a modest treaty and to be really a first step in making an impact. So the average global emission reduction that the protocol envisaged was about a 5% reduction below 1990 levels. And if you look at the recent climate change case we had in the Netherlands, the Agenda case, that reduction was 25% below 1990 levels. So you can see the 5% reduction, which was the aim in the Kyoto Protocol, was a really modest aim. Some argue the protocol was a total failure. Others say it was successful in many aspects. For me, I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I think some parts were really successful, other parts maybe not so much. But it is and remains a really important step in the development of the international climate change regime. So what we saw here very clearly was this idea of differentiated responsibility between parties. So there was a differentiation between Annex 1 countries and non-Annex 1 countries. So the developed world and the developing world. And this is considered to be a key reason why the protocol couldn't really succeed. Because at this time, it was previously accepted perhaps that developed countries were more responsible for climate change. But at this time, massive economies started to boom, making huge contributions to greenhouse gas emissions. So think about economies like China and India and even South Africa. And all of a sudden, these countries making massive greenhouse gas emission contributions were not being held responsible in terms of the Kyoto Protocol. So the protocol had a really difficult obstacle to overcome, and ultimately it couldn't overcome this obstacle. Something that it also introduced, which is very interesting, is carbon trading. So in some respects, carbon trading was successful, but in other respects, it became a matter of simply passing the buck between countries, ultimately making it not as effective as it could be. So then what changed? Because of course, we've moved on from the Kyoto Protocol, but why was there this massive shift? Well, there was a massive shift, which is quite political actually, but we know as lawyers, politics and law are closely connected. And the shift here came from the USA and China. So the USA never wanted to be a party to the Kyoto Protocol because economies like China were not being bound in terms of the protocol. But now these two countries, which at the time actually had the biggest carbon dioxide emissions in the whole world, there was a kind of political shift, making them more amenable to comply with certain climate change objectives, if we can call it that. So the science really started to improve for climate change, and then politically, what was happening in China at this time was that people in China began referring to fog, which is of course a weather condition. They began referring to fog as smog, which is of course a state of pollution. So all of a sudden there was this shift and this focus on pollution. At the same time, there was this study released saying that people in northern China, their life expectancy was being reduced by 5.5 years due to pollution. So of course we know pollution and climate change is not really the same thing. They're connected, but it's not the same thing. But it didn't matter so much because in the eyes of the middle class in China, the people that were exerting some pressure, these things were the same. And the Chinese government saw an opportunity to make a bit of a move when it came to climate change and to take a bit of a more positive stance, if you want to call it that. So that happened in China. Meanwhile, in the USA, President Obama was in his second term. And previously, he was focusing on the global financial crisis and he was focusing on healthcare. But now in his second term, he had a political opportunity to focus on climate change. And all of a sudden, he saw he could leave this environmental legacy in a sense too, politically. So these two countries shifted and they became partners in the international global climate change regime, which made a massive difference. At the same time, also, we could notice internationally that there was an economic incentive to addressing climate change. So people began to realize it's simply going to cost us financially a lot more to respond to climate change in the future than simply trying to respond to it now and trying to mitigate and trying to adapt as soon as possible. So with all this taken into account, there was a very positive event that happened, and that was, of course, the Paris Agreement. And the Paris Agreement, in a sense, replaced the Kyoto Protocol. But in order to understand why the Paris Agreement is so important in the international climate change regime, it's good that we know what happened in the Kyoto Protocol and what were some of the shortcomings. So the first really important element of the Paris Agreement is the fact that all parties are now obliged to undertake climate commitments. So previously, you know now that we only had developed countries taking the lead, and we only had developed countries being bound to making greenhouse gas emission reductions. But all of a sudden now, we have all parties that need to do that. And of course, there is still this element of common but differentiated responsibilities because, of course, countries are different. Their economic capabilities are very different when it comes to climate change. So we can still, as a country, respond in a quite individual manner, but we have to respond in terms of the Paris Agreement, and that is one of the key elements that is so important today. So the Paris Agreement, of course, aims to keep the temperature limit to no more than 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, and that's quite a key component of the agreement. So then, there are three kind of significant improvements, possibly a few more, but I think for us today, we can take note of about three components that are quite important. So the first one is this idea that I've already introduced about nationally determined contributions. So each country sets their own NDC based on their own capability, based on their own developmental status. And what's interesting here is that each country has to set a new NDC every 5 years. And that brings me to the third improvement. When the country sets a new NDC, it has to be stricter. So there's this ratchet effect in the Paris Agreement. You can only make your NDCs stricter and stricter and stricter. You cannot relax them. And some people say this is really key to making the Paris Agreement effective. Of course, this year, I think it was finished in October 2023, we had the global stocktake, which showed that we are not on our way to really achieving the goals we've set in the Paris Agreement, but that's a bit of a longer story. We're going to have COP28 at the end of November to December, and I think we'll get some more answers here of what exactly this means now. But to come back to some improvements, the second really massive improvement that we see in the Paris Agreement is the review mechanism. That's quite key. So we have a couple of different review mechanisms. Firstly, we have review of actual implementation, and you can find that in Article 13. So this is where we ask, have countries done what they say they are going to do? Then we have a second review mechanism. This is review of collective ambition. And here we ask, have we as a whole international community been moving as quickly and as strongly as we need to towards the Paris Agreement? And here the global stocktake that was just completed showed that maybe it's not the case. And then the third review mechanism is this idea of the facilitative compliance mechanism, and you can find that in Article 15. It's a very friendly mechanism, it's non-punitive, and we'll have to see if that kind of review mechanism can be successful. Time will tell in that regard. So what we also see in the Paris Agreement is that the process of withdrawal for a state takes much longer. So when we had the Kyoto Protocol, Canada, for instance, realized they were not going to make their commitments a reality. So they just quietly withdrew from the Kyoto Protocol without facing any international scrutiny. In terms of the Paris Agreement, it's a bit more tricky. You might remember when President Trump started the withdrawal process from the Paris Agreement. But before that process could even be completed, there were new elections and President Biden sort of recommitted to the Paris Agreement. So the USA is still very much a part of the Paris Agreement. So this withdrawal procedure that is a bit longer is also in some sense an improvement in the overall regime. So I think that brings us to really the core of the international legal climate change regime. That is in such a nutshell, but that is really what you need to know when we speak about this regime, where it came from, how it developed, and where we currently are. And then I think it's always good to think about, we have this international regime, but how do we make it a reality in our country, even perhaps in our companies that we end up working one day? And here I think a wonderful link between this international legal climate change regime and really real practical effects can be facilitated by the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So, of course, we see these everywhere. It's a hot topic. Everyone wants to talk about it. But a few people actually knows how we can use these goals and what these goals. I just hear someone talking. Is it possible to mute them? Okay, great.
Sorry, you can continue.
I can continue. Thank you so much. Okay, so then let's speak a little bit about the Sustainable Development Goals. I always get asked by students, what are they really? And I think the easiest way to understand them is to see them as an attempt of a shared language. So if you see these goals as a shared language or some kind of common language for governments, they start to make a bit more sense. So these goals are a common language that we can use across countries, across geographies, and we can use these goals to compare work that is being done on various fronts by governments, by private actors, and we can compare the outcome of this work because we have these really common standards by which to measure the outcome. And you'll understand why exactly I say that in just a little bit. So what I also like to think about is how impressive these goals actually are. Because you might not know this. Yes, we know it was adopted in 2015, but it took about 3 years of really robust community consultations to come up with these goals. There were approximately 8 million people involved across the globe. And what these 8 million people did were they framed about 300 issues that were really core issues, core problem areas in their communities. And from these 300 issues, we then distilled these 17 goals. So these 17 goals can be seen as a best guess of what the fundamental global issues in the world are currently. And if we address them by 2030, there's actually a chance that we can transform our world. And that's why we also refer to these goals as the 2030 agenda. So of course, for us today, goal 13, climate action, is super relevant. But actually, if you think about the international climate change regime, it connects to so many of these goals. Think about life below water, life on land, clean energy, zero hunger, good health and well-being, sustainable communities. So you can see how all of this is so interrelated and how many of these goals become a really practical way in which we can distill the international legal climate change regime within the daily operations of government and companies. So we did have a kind of a similar initiative in the year 2000. We had the Millennium Development Goals. But the difference was that in the Millennium Development Goals, there was a massive focus on one thing in particular, and that was poverty reduction. It was quite successful, but the focus was on developed countries helping developing countries. But what's fantastic about the Sustainable Development Goals, and what we also see in the Paris Agreement, the focus is on all countries. Regardless of your status, regardless of if you're developed or developing, you have a key role to play. And I think that's another component of the international regime, international climate change regime, that we can see in how the Sustainable Development Goals actually function. So then finally, in a very practical kind of sense, how do these goals function? Well, if we take goal 13, the short PR version is climate action, but actually goal 13 means to take action to combat climate change and its impacts. And each goal that we see in that beautiful, colorful picture is actually underpinned by some targets and by some indicators. So that's why we say the SDGs are a common shared language, because we can measure results. we can actually measure results. We can use these indicators and we can use these targets to measure results of different actors, governments, private actors, in regard to something very specific. So under goal 13, you will see, for instance, target 13.1, which is to strengthen resilience and adaptive capacity to climate-related hazards and natural disasters in all countries. So what would be an indicator of the fact that we are reaching this target? Well, 13.1.1, for instance, says, what is the number of countries with national and local disaster risk reduction strategies? That's easy enough, right? We can count this. It's a common standard. It's something measurable. And if we add up all of these indicators for the different targets, we can calculate, are we actually on track to reaching goal 13, climate action? So I think time-wise, I went a little more quickly, but I think this is a good place to end, perhaps, now that you have a good understanding of practically how the SDGs function, and you have a good understanding of the framework, hopefully, of the international climate change regime. And I very much look forward to our next speaker. I know whose contribution will also be massively linked to the Sustainable Development Goals. But thank you so much for listening. And I'll stop sharing my screen here, Dina.
Cool. Thank you very much, Sanita, for your really an eye-opening and insightful session. So we will move forward to the second speaker first. Once again, thank you very much, Sanita. I will introduce our second speaker. Okay, so our second speaker, Dr. Andes Suhadi, SIMSE. He is currently the coordinator of the doctoral study program at Faculty of Law, Universitas Negeri Semarang, with his doctoral degree in law in Diponegoro University, and he's starting his teaching career starting from 1993. So without any further ado, I would welcome Dr. Suhadi to present his session. Dr. Suhadi, the time is yours.
Okay, thanks to the moderator, Dr. Tina Sylvia Putri. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, Dr. Sanita Panwitz from Tilburg University in the Netherlands. We thank God this afternoon we were able to attend the global classroom activities. On this occasion, I will present my paper titled Optimizing the Legal Function in Protecting Sustainable Food Agriculture Land, Indonesian Legal Perspective. In general, I divide the presentation into 5 parts, namely agriculture land conversion, a legal issue in sustainable development, regulation on food agriculture land protection in Indonesia, C, law as an instrument for directing government and community behavior, D, law as an instrument to control government and community behavior, and E, conclusion. The availability of sufficient food agricultural land is an important factor in effort to realize sustainable development goals. The availability of food agricultural lands makes an important contribution to achieving sustainable development goals, especially goal 2 and goal 15, namely end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. And goals 15, protect restore and promote sustainable use or terrestrial ecosystem, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification and halt and reverse land degradation and halt biodiversity loss. Sustainable agricultural development policy is a response and at the same time concrete support for achieving sustainable development goals. However, sustainable agricultural development policies are faced with serious challenges in the form of decreasing agricultural land, which occur due to change in the function of agricultural land to meet development needs in various fields, including industry, housing, and infrastructure development. The conversion of rice field reached 110,000 hectares per year, 96,500 hectares per year, and 100,000 to 150,000 hectares per year at 2020. The impact of conservation threatens the sustainability of food self-sufficiency, reduced labor absorption, was the central and regional government investment, reduce the quality of the environment, and disrupt the stability of the social structure of society. In other words, the impact of conservation is related to economic, social, and environmental aspects. Regulation for food agricultural land protection in Indonesia. The form of regulation for food agricultural land protection in Indonesia are in the form of laws, government regulation, residential regulation, ministerial regulation, provincial, regional regulation, and regency or city regional regulation. In detail, the regulation in question are follow law number 41 of 29 on protection of sustainable food agricultural land, government regulation number 1 of 2011 on determination and conservation of sustainable food agricultural land, government regulation number 12 of government regulation number 25 of 2011 on sustainable food agricultural land information system, government regulation number 30 of 2011 on financing sustainable food agricultural land, presidential regulation number 59 of 2019 on control of the conservation of rice field, Minister of Agriculture regulation number 7 of 2012 on technical guidelines for criteria and requirement of land area and land reserve for sustainable food agriculture. Minister of Agriculture regulation number 79 of 2030 on guidelines for land sustainability for food crop commodities. Minister of Agriculture regulation number 80 of 2030 on criteria and procedure for assessment of high achievement farmers on LP2B. Minister of Agriculture regulation number 61 of 2030 on technical guidelines for procedure for transferring LP to be functioned. Decree of the Minister of Agriculture number 1, 2090 on guidelines for facilitation of sustainable food farming land. Regulation of the Coordinating Minister for the Economy number 18 of 2020 on the working procedure of the integrated team for controlling the conservation of rice land and the implementing team for controlling the conservation of rice land. Regulation of the Minister of Agrarian Affairs and Special Planning, head of the National Land Agency, number 12 of 2020, on procedure for implementing verification of rice field data against land and spatial planning data, determining maps of protected rice field, and providing recommendation for change in land use and protected rice field. Kendal Regency Regional Regulation number 20 of 2011 on Kendal Regency Spatial Planning, Kendal Regency Regional Regulation number 13 of 2013 on protection of sustainable food agricultural land in Kendal Regency as amended by Kendal Regency Regional Regulation number 11 of 2020. Law as an instrument for directing government and community behavior. These people state that law function and contributes to the sustainable protection of food agricultural land through optimizing its function as a tool of social engineering and a tool of social control. Through its function as a social engineering tool, law regulated change and direct government and community behavior in accordance with legal objective, in this case protecting food agricultural land and controlling the conversion of agricultural land. In the context of food agricultural land, the government's behavior is regulated and directed to be obligated to protect sustainable food agricultural land and be obligated to provide guidance to everyone related to the use of LP2AB, sustainable food farming land. A form of sustainable food farming land protection is the establishment of sustainable food agricultural land areas, which consist of sustainable food agricultural land and sustainable food agricultural land reserved by the government. Determination of sustainable food farming land reserve areas is contained in Regency or City Regional Regulation concerning regional spatial planning or regional regulation which specifically regulated sustainable food farming land. For example, the Kendal Regency Government of Central Java Province stipulated LP2AB in the Kendal Regency Regional Regulation number 20 of 2011 concerning the Kendal Regency Regional Spatial Plan for 2011 until 2031 and the Kendal Regency Regional Regulation number 13 of 2013 concerning the protection of sustainable food agricultural land in Kendal Regency. As stated, has been amended by Kendal Regency Regional Regulation number 11 of 2020. The government obligation to provide guidance is carried out, among other things, through incentive, disincentive, licensing, protection, and counseling. Community behavior is directed as follows. Every person who has right to land designated as sustainable food farming land is obligated to use the land according to its intended purpose and prevent damage to irrigation. Every person plays a role in maintaining and increasing the fertility of the land, preventing land damage, and maintaining sustainable environment. The public is prohibited from converting agricultural land that has been designated as sustainable food farming land unless it is used for development in the public interest. Law as an instrument for controlling government and community behavior. The function of law as an instrument for social control can be seen from the sanction given to the government and society who do not carry out their obligation or violate prohibited things. For example, owner of land right who cause damage to agricultural land are obligated to repair the damage. Owner who convert land are obligated to reimburse the value of infrastructure investment. Owners who use agricultural land inappropriately are obligated to return the sustainable food farming lands to its original condition. Sanctions for violators include written warnings, temporary suspension of activities, temporary suspension of public services, location closure, revocation of permit, cancellation of permit, demolition of buildings, restoration of land function, revocation of incentive, and administrative fines. Based on the description and discussion, the following can be concluded. 1. Law function and contribute to the sustainable protection of food agriculture land through optimizing its function as a tool of social engineering and a tool of social control. Through its function as a social engineering tools, law regulated change and direct government and community behavior in accordance with legal objective. In this case, protecting food agricultural land and controlling the conversion of agricultural land. 3. The function of law as an instrument of social control can be seen from the sanction given to the government and society who do not carry out their obligation or violate prohibited things. Thank you, Mr. Dina. Mrs. Dina.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Dr. Suhadi. It is really an interesting session, an eye-opening session that we can learn about the food security through protecting the agricultural land. So now we will move to the question and answer session. So I will open the question and answer session for everyone. If you have any questions, you are welcome to write them down on the chat room, or you can raise your hand and we will point you out. But I actually have questions for both Sanita and Dr. Suhadi. So for Sanita, what about you, wait a second. So I am all for the keeping environment in maximum state globally. Nevertheless, the capability of each country is different, as well as the environmental condition. Is there any sanction imposed to countries that could not meet the target as stated? Maybe we can you can directly answer the questions while we will waiting for the questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Dina, for that question. It's such an excellent question, because isn't that the core problem with international law? It's to have accountability, and to make states responsible for these international commitments. And I think that's what's really interesting about the Kyoto Protocol. You know, Canada made this commitment, but then they just said, oh, well, actually, this is not going to work for us. We will leave the protocol. And then we have the Paris Agreement where states are making commitments. They're more bound to it. And now the global stocktake is showing, well, everyone is not really on track and what's going to happen now. So I don't know what the answer is here. First of all, we'll have to see with the Conference of the Parties at the end of November, what do they think about this global stocktake, showing that countries are not really doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's the first part. But I think very practically, where we struggle to have international accountability on an international stage, that is why it's so important what is happening nationally. And that's why cases like the Agenda case in the Netherlands, and there are many cases in South Africa too, the Deadly Air case, for example, that's why these cases are so important, because that on a practical level is the state being held accountable by its own citizens. So even if we have this shortage of accountability on the international stage, we can have it nationally. And I think maybe we should shift our focus there, since there are no real answers yet to really improve international accountability. So that would be my kind of long answer to your question, Dina.
Okay, interesting. Thank you very much, Sanita. So we will move to the second question. This is directed to Dr. Suhadi. When did the awareness of the government in respect with the agricultural land conversion begin? In addition to that, how effective do the regulations in terms of converting land into agricultural? Jadi pertanyaannya Pak Suhadi, sejak kapan pemerintah ini mulai menaruh perhatian terhadap konversi agricultural land ini, lahan sawah ini, dan bagaimana, apakah sudah efektif sejauh ini dalam regulasinya? Terima kasih, silakan.
Okay. I will answer question using bahasa. Please, Miss Dina, to translate. Saudara-saudara, perhatian pemerintah terhadap alih fungsi lahan itu sudah sejak lama sebenarnya, tetapi oleh karena tren perubahan konversi tanah pertanian menjadi tanah non pertanian itu sedemikian marak, maka salah satu upaya hukum yang dipakai adalah dengan membentuk undang-undang. Undang-undang yang dimaksud adalah Undang-Undang Nomor 41 tahun 2009 tentang perlindungan lahan pertanian pangan berkelanjutan. Nah, di dalam undang-undang itu diatur bahwa lahan pertanian yang sudah ditetapkan sebagai lahan pertanian berkelanjutan itu tidak dapat dialihfungsikan, atau dengan kata lain harus dipertahankan sebagai lahan pertanian pangan berkelanjutan. Tetapi ada pengecualiannya, yaitu kecuali digunakan untuk pembangunan kepentingan umum. Jadi hukum umumnya tidak boleh dialihkan kecuali untuk pembangunan kepentingan umum. Lalu bagaimana efektivitas undang-undang yang dimaksud? Sampai sejauh ini, undang-undang ini belum efektif, ya, belum efektif. Peraturan-peraturan turunan yang dibuat itu belum diimplementasikan secara penuh. Saya ambil contoh, pemberian insentif kepada para petani yang memiliki lahan pertanian itu ternyata juga belum diberikan. Ya, ini saya potong-potong dulu ini ya, supaya diterjemahkan oleh Mbak Dina.
Siap, terima kasih Pak Swadi. So the answer from Dr. Swadi previously is actually the government is already put the attention to this agricultural land conversion since a long time. However, like for the enforcement itself, like the government is already mentioned like in the regulation that the agricultural land can be used only for the public interest. So ya, sepertinya tadi seperti itu bisa dilanjutkan.
Ya, baik. Jadi beberapa peraturan yang diatur itu belum dilaksanakan secara penuh, termasuk tadi ada insentif dan disinsentif. Nah, problem yang ada di lapangan bahwa perubahan tanah pertanian ini akibat ada tekanan yang luar biasa dari bidang-bidang lain, terutama pembangunan perumahan, pembangunan kawasan industri, pembangunan infrastruktur yang di masyarakat itu mau tidak mau akan mengubah tanah pertanian menjadi tanah non-pertanian. Nah, ini yang belum sepenuhnya bisa dikendalikan oleh pemerintah, tetapi paling tidak ada satu sarana hukum yang akan mengendalikan perilaku itu. Jadi perilaku itu tidak kemudian bebas sebebas-bebasnya, tetapi ada kontrol ya dari hukum yang dibentuk.
So, like currently, from the other governmental institutions, they are demanding and pressuring for this agricultural land to be used to another, to be used for like another stuff, like for building house and stuff. So we need like the help from the government for it to be guided like from the community and from the government to guide the agricultural land together. I think that's the answer from Pak Swadi. Thank you very much, Dr. Swadi. So we have next question from Dr. Irawati, like the questions about the, like, since Sanita, you are from South Africa, but you currently live in the Netherlands, right? So how do you think about the efforts from the Netherlands and South Africa regarding the SDGs to keep the environmental, to keep the environment, like what's the difference and what's like the similarity between the Netherlands and the South Africa to keep the SDGs? Can you, okay.
Yeah, that is a great question. I recently wrote an article on very in a practical sense, what's the difference between how climate change cases are being decided in the Netherlands versus in South Africa. So of course, this doesn't deal with all of the SDGs like the question asks, but it deals with at least one of them, which is climate action. And what I found was that surprisingly, both countries are responding extremely positive. And you can imagine the great difference between them, right? The Netherlands with this amazing financial capacity and technical capacity, and South Africa with many other problems it has to deal with, like poverty and unemployment, great issues. But actually, the difference found practically in how these cases are adjudicated when they do come to court, what we saw in the Agenda case is that people can rely on human rights and bring climate cases to court. But in South Africa, we have to go via a more administrative law path. We have to challenge the environmental impact assessment, saying that the impacts on climate change were not adequately addressed there. So it's a very constitutional law-based approach, and it's a very administrative law-based approach in South Africa. But ultimately, the courts are open to making very favorable decisions that ultimately are of a great help to enforcing SDG 13 climate action. So there's a big difference in the approach and the kind of the rights that you can lean on to bring these climate cases to court. But ultimately, I think there's a very positive climate change adjudication atmosphere in both countries. And then I think if I can just add something onto that too, of course, in South Africa, what I find interesting is in just a general response to SDGs, is the fact that we have so many local indigenous communities that are really living closely to the environment. And now when we see and when we have to plan for how we adapt to climate change, we can really look to the knowledge of these communities because they have been adapting to climate change for many years. They are well equipped. If you think back about the pictures I shared about that desert area, right? The people that live there are really well equipped to living without water. So we can learn so much from them. And I think in that sense, South Africa is perhaps a very rich country to learn from because we still have these indigenous communities compared to, for instance, the Netherlands. Thank you, Dina.
Cool. That's really interesting to know that like there's a lot of indigenous people in South Africa because it goes the same in Indonesia. We also have a lot of indigenous people who are living together. So it is really interesting. Thank you, Sanita. Okay, so for the next question is from Mr. Rai Karisma Rajib. Maybe Mr. Rai, you can open mic and ask the question directly.
Okay, thank you, Miss Dina. I want some question. There is always local wisdom in every community. How does the government include the numerous local wisdom? Since in Indonesia, there are the numerous adat law community into the regulation. Does the local wisdom bring advantage or disadvantage to the land conversion, the policy, in order to achieve the goals of the land convention at the sustainable development goal? Can that answer my question? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rai. So this is the question is for Dr. Suhadi, right? Ya, oke.
Right.
So Pak Suhadi, pertanyaannya, jadi kan di Indonesia banyak local wisdom atau masyarakat adat gitu ya, Pak ya. Nah, bagaimana bagaimana pengaturan mengenai land conversion policy ini tadi terhadap masyarakat adat? Apakah ada advantage keuntungan atau justru kerugian dari land conversion ini untuk mencapai goals dan pencapaian dari SDG-nya sendiri? Silakan Pak Swedi.
Baik, terima kasih Dina. Saudara Rayi, bahwa pemerintah dalam konteks memasukkan berbagai kearifan lokal ini dalam beberapa undang-undang memang sudah dimasukkan ya, termasuk dalam konteks perlindungan masyarakat adat. Tetapi kalau yang dimaksud itu adalah memasukkan kearifan lokal di dalam undang-undang perlindungan lahan pertanian pangan, ini tampaknya belum kelihatan ya, belum ada norma yang secara khusus mengatur kearifan lokal itu. Kalau tadi dikatanyakan apakah kearifan lokal itu membawa keuntungan atau kerugian ya terhadap kebijakan konversi lahan dalam rangka mencapai tujuan konversi, ini jawabannya begini. Secara umum lahan pertanian pangan sekarang ini ada di kawasan pedesaan. Ya, salah satu penciri dan sekaligus pembeda antara kawasan pedesaan itu masih menunjukkan satu kawasan di mana lahan pertanian itu mudah dijumpai. Nah, berkait dengan itu maka kearifan-kearifan lokal masyarakat pedesaan terutama itu sebenarnya sangat positif ya, sangat positif dalam mendukung perlindungan terhadap lahan pertanian pangan berkelanjutan. Penelitian saya di Kabupaten Kendal itu menunjukkan bahwa ada satu tempat, ada satu desa yang lahan pertaniannya itu masih terawat dengan baik. Artinya belum banyak beralih fungsi menjadi perumahan, kawasan industri, dan seterusnya. Karena masyarakat di situ mempercayai lahan pertanian yang dia miliki itu merupakan warisan leluhur yang harus dipertahankan sebagai lahan pertanian, sebagai modal kehidupan masyarakat desa itu. Dan menurut sejarah di desa itu, lahan pertanian yang sekarang dimiliki oleh masyarakat itu merupakan hadiah dari penguasa wilayah Kendal pada masa penjajahan dulu, ya, pada masa kerajaan dulu, ya, masih lama sekali, itu dirawat betul hingga sampai saat ini. Tidak ada satu bagian pun yang kemudian dialihkan untuk fungsi-fungsi lain. Itu satu, ya, di Kendal. Nah, lalu bagaimana masyarakat melindungi tanah pertanian? Mereka merawat betul, ya, tanah pertanian itu dengan menjaga kesuburannya supaya unsur hara terlindungi, produksi juga bisa ditingkatkan. Kemudian di tempat lain, masih di Jawa Tengah, itu ada di kawasan Pati bagian selatan. Itu juga ada masyarakat-masyarakat lokal, dia punya kearifan lokal, bahkan dia punya ideologi sebagai petani, itu dia merawat betul, ya, tanah-tanah pertaniannya itu supaya tidak digunakan untuk keperluan industri. Dalam konteks ini adalah rencana dibangun sebagai pabrik semen. Dia menolak betul. Nah, ini contoh-contoh kearifan lokal yang saya kira itu sangat positif, ya, dalam konteks bagaimana melindungi lahan pertanian sehingga tidak terkonversi menjadi lahan non-pertanian. Saya kira itu tanggapan saya untuk Saudara Rai Karisma. Terima kasih, Dina.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Swadi.
Okay. So in brief, what Dr. Suhadi has mentioned is that currently the regulation is already putting attention to the indigenous people. However, for the local wisdom, it is not yet inside the regulation. However, from his research in Kendal, one of the city in Indonesia, the indigenous people is actually protecting their agricultural land, so they did not want the land to be converted into industrial use. I think that's for the brief. So we have the next question from Feiruz. You may open your mic.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Mrs. Tina, for the chance. Yeah, I would like to give the question for Mrs. Sanita. Mrs. Sanita, I'm very interested about your presentation about Paris Agreement. And it makes me wondering, we know that there are 5 main points which are the conclusion of the Paris Agreement, and one of which is mitigation efforts for reducing loss and damage by the stranding recovery effort to the climate change. And I will mention for the example in Indonesia, that is through the energy use transition. And the Indonesian government also passed a regulation which regulate the formation of a carbon market. And one of the interests in Indonesia is about introduce a carbon tax. So I think that's the regulation in Indonesia. And so how about in the Netherlands? Is that there any special regulation that seek the use of energy transition and climate recovery? I think it's enough. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. I'm not an expert really on Dutch environmental law, more so on international environmental law. But what I do know in the Netherlands is that a carbon tax was announced, but they call this document in which you can find this the climate agreement. So in the Netherlands, they have their own climate agreement, and here you can find their legislation regarding carbon tax. And then this tax is going to apply as in accordance with the EU guidelines. So the EU sets a benchmark, and it sets the European Union sets a reduction path to which the Netherlands must comply. But how the Netherlands will do this, you will find in their climate agreement. I hope that answers your question, Feiruz, and thank you so much for asking it.
Okay, thank you very much, Sanita, for answering the question from Feiruz. So we have another questions from our friend Julie. So this is directed to Dr. Suhadi. So Indonesia is one of the largest population as well as country's territory. However, the population distribution is still uneven. Is there any particular policy regarding this matter to achieve the goals of the land conversion policy? Jadi pertanyaannya Pak, karena Indonesia kan besar sekali ya dengan populasi yang sangat banyak, masyarakatnya ini, jadi bagaimana apakah ada peraturan tertentu mengenai ini dalam hal konversi lahan seperti itu? Terima kasih.
Baik, terima kasih. Satu kenyataan bahwa jumlah penduduk atau populasi Indonesia itu sudah meningkat tajam ya. Paling tidak sekarang penduduk Indonesia lebih dari 270 juta jiwa. Tentu itu berimplikasi pada penggunaan lahan ya, penggunaan tanah. Dan disitulah kemudian tanah diperebutkan oleh banyak kepentingan untuk memenuhi berbagai kebutuhan tadi, baik kebutuhan terkait dengan perumahan, ya, kebutuhan untuk infrastruktur, kebutuhan untuk lahan pertanian, dan seterusnya. Nah, kemudian bagaimana ini ditata dan diatur? Maka dalam konteks yang lebih luas, kita mengenal ada perundang-undangan tentang tata ruang, ya, tentang tata ruang. Dengan tata ruang itu, wilayah di suatu daerah, di kabupaten atau kota, itu ditentukan peruntukannya, ya, untuk apakah itu untuk perumahan, apakah itu untuk pertanian, apakah itu untuk buka hijau, begitu, itu supaya semua itu akomodir. Nah, keberadaan peraturan perundang-undangan tentang perlindungan lahan pertanian pangan ini dalam rangka melindungi supaya tanah-tanah pertanian itu tidak kemudian habis, dan kalau itu terjadi maka akan mengancam keberlanjutan kehidupan, akan mengancam ketahanan pangan, akan mengancam kedaulatan pangan. Dan itu tidak selaras dengan pembangunan berkelanjutan. Sehingga keberadaan lahan pertanian pangan berkelanjutan ini sangat penting, ya, supaya kehidupan generasi yang sekarang, apa yang dinikmati oleh generasi yang sekarang itu bisa juga dinikmati oleh generasi yang akan datang. Generasi yang akan datang tidak akan mengalami kondisi kekurangan pangan, ya, karena masih dipertahankannya lahan-lahan pertanian itu sehingga bisa diolah, dimanfaatkan, sehingga produksinya kemudian bisa memberikan manfaat bagi kebutuhan. Kemudian, Budina.
Baik, terima kasih Pak. So, to put the brief from Dr. Suhadi's answer, currently there are regulations regarding spatial agreement special arrangement. So the designated agriculture limited to be that it shouldn't threaten the food security in Indonesia. So I think that's the brief answer from Dr. Suhadi. So I think I will close the question and answer session. Thank you very much for the question and answer session from Dr. Suhadi and also Dr. Sanita. This is really an interesting session. I hope everyone enjoy the session and can take the key learnings from every speaker. Thank you, Dr. Sanita and also Dr. Suhadi for the amazing session. And thank you everyone for your attention. So I will close the session and will give back the session to the MC. So MC, the time is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Dina. Wow, it's just an interesting discussion, yeah. Thank you so much for Mrs. Dina as our moderator and also our speakers, Mrs. Sanita and Mr. Suhadi for wonderful and gentlemen, finally we come to the last section. Now we have to come to the end of this global classroom between Faculty of Law, Universitas Negeri Semarang, and Faculty of Law, Tilburg University, with its environmental law and sustainability in international and Indonesia perspective. I hope the knowledge that we got now can useful in the future. And Ferus Ramita Lamsha, as the master of ceremony in this event, would like to say thank you so much to all the audience who has made this event successful. And the last word, I'm sorry for some mistakes. See you on the next global classroom. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you, Miss Anita.
Thank you very much, Sanita, for your time. Have a good day. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Pak Suhadi.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.